All right, now what we want to do is secure this green thread and switch it for a different colored thread. So I'm going to zoom out so you can see how we do this. I'm going to flip the canvas over because my thread's on the back side. Oops, let's see if I can do this without knocking the thing over. And zoom in a tiny bit. So to secure a thread to the back of the canvas, all we want to do is run the thread, and this is a very fat needle so it's a little tricky, but I'm going to just run the thread underneath the stitches that are there. Be careful you don't puncture to the other side of the canvas. You want this to all be on the back side. That alone is not enough to secure it. If I left it like this, it's possible the stitches on the other side would come out. So I do a locking stitch by just one or two little, doesn't need to be big. If you are working with a more slippery thread, you might find you need to actually do 2 locking stitches, but typically 1 is plenty. Now I'm just going to cut that off and I can switch over to a different color thread. So this is the new color of thread that I'm going to use. This one is still in the condition that it comes in from a shop. So a lot of times you go to a needlepoint shop and you come home with these skeins of yarn or thread and you don't know how to make them into usable pieces. So I will show you how to do that. But before we cut this apart, I just want to point out that it's helpful to hang on to these cards because they say on them what the color is, but they also tell you what the lot number is. This is important because if you run out of the thread, not all dye lots of this color are going to be exactly the same. They could be just a smidgen off, and if you're doing a background and you run out in the middle, it might create a problem for you. So you want to hang on to the to this card so you know what dye lot it is, and you know, if you doubt, you should buy more rather than less. So I just cut that accidentally and we're just going to pull this skein apart and divide it up like this. So then I'm just looking at this. Okay. Now I'm going to hang on to the card. You can even take a little piece of thread and put it around that hole so that if you forget, you know what that skein is. And I cut this one end, and then I go to the other end and I cut that. And now I have threads that are ready to be worked. Typically when you store these, you just want to very gently tie them in a nice loose knot, and this will help keep them nice and tidy for your work. And various threads, you want to work with various lengths. So it kind of depends on how, if you use a really long strand on some projects, it will fray. So you might want to cut and work with a smaller strand. It's really, that's a personal choice. Okay, so we are going to thread this into the needle again, and I'll show the needle threading choice and the other option as well. So I'm running this through, put the needle threader in the needle first, run the thread through the needle threader, pull the strand through. So that's your first option. Your second option is pinch the thread between the needle. Use your finger and your thumb to squeeze it, and then just run your needle right over it, kind of coax that thread through. Either is fine, it's really your preference. Okay. Now, just like how we ended the green, this is how we're going to attach this new color onto our work. Since we have an area that already has some work on it, instead of doing a waist knot, we can actually attach this color to the back of this green. All right. So the way that I'm going to do that is exactly the way that I did ended the green. I'm just going to run it underneath like that. I'm not going to pull it all the way through. Now if I started stitching right now, this would just pull right through. So I do need to do that tacking stitch to secure the thread. And then you just do a gentle tug to see if it's secure. If it were not, you'd have to do another tacking stitch. You can see that, so this is one way to secure thread. You can see that on the first, when we did the green, I had nothing to attach that green thread to. So I used what's called a waist knot. And you have to do this when you don't have some stitched area to put this on. I'm going to flip it over and I'll show you. You'll notice though that I was very careful about where I put the waist knot. Since I was starting to stitch here, I put the waist knot here, so that as I work down, I'm going to stitch over that green thread in back, and I will be able to cut off that waist knot in no time at all. So if you're just starting a brand new project and you need to, you don't have anything to attach a thread to like I just did here, you'll use the waist knot, you'll tie a knot, run it through the canvas, and go in where the background, where the thread that's running behind it is going to go over the area that you're going to work. Okay, so we're going to just do the next row. And I'll zoom in again so you can see it. So I'm doing this stitch right here, and I'm just going to go right like that. Now, typically, you would not do the dark colors first. I did the dark color first here because I thought it might be easier to see on the video. But typically, you would want to start your light colors on your project, because if you have a dark thread running behind this, sometimes the fibers from the dark green will pull through and show a shadow in your light colors. So normally you would want to start with your light colors and then work your way to your darker colors. You can see there's a teeny bit of green kind of peeking through on that hole right there. But again, I made an exception for this because I wanted to be sure that you could see the thread that I was putting onto the canvas. There we go. All right, so we'll finish up our third row here. So it's just putting together a bunch of going across the X in the same direction throughout the whole canvas. So now at this point, we have probably stitched over enough of that waist knot behind the underneath this work, so we can actually just snip this waist knot off. And that's pretty much how you do continental stitch in needlepoint. I hope that you've had fun, that you've learned something new, and we'll also be putting up a how to do basket weave video as well. Have fun.